Hello, and welcome back to another InsideLowell podcast here in the Wellpoint Studios. It's me again, Mark Gelsomini. Last episode, you saw me talking about Lowell Drake at Tyngsboro State Forest, which is pretty neat, in a little segment that I like to call Hills by the Mills. Well, today we're doing something a little similar. We have Thrills by the Mills. Thunderstrike. We're going to be talking about... some spooky occurrences that have happened in Tyngsboro in the past. And today, I'm not going to be as alone as before. We have my good friend, Derek Bailey, joining us over Zoom.
How's it going, everyone? Glad to be here.
Good to see you, Derek. Even though
good to be here.
It's a little low quality, but...
Slightly. A little bit of a throwback to the early days of YouTube and such type things.
Oh, yeah. I love the throwback. I love it.
Oh, yeah. So there's a little retro. It's nice.
Right. Like I said, the quality may be low on the camera, but our conversation is going to be nice for sure.
Top quality.
So, I mean, Derek, you're a good friend of mine. We've been friends for a while. I know you're a big history buff. You know, we get
Yes,
into
sir, I am. Love history.
Right. We get into all kinds of shenanigans.
Lord knows I can yap about history.
All right. Well, heck yeah. So, well, today we're going to be talking about, like I said, some hauntings in Tyngsboro, and specifically the Tyng Mansion. I guess, how familiar are you with the local history of our town? Because you went to Tyngsboro High with me. You know, we've been living there for a while. I know you're now in Lowell, but what do you know about it and anything?
Well, I know a bit. Not, honestly, I wish I knew a little bit more about Tyngsboro. I knew that Tyngsboro was founded by a guy named Tyng. I believe I know where he is buried or where one of his sons is buried, but maybe someone just told me the wrong information. I believe, was he not a veteran of the Revolutionary War, or am I making that up? I feel like I heard that too.
So he was definitely a veteran of the King Philip's War, and I believe he was in a different war than the Revolutionary one prior to that. But I think he was a little bit before the time of the Revolutionary War. That was pre-America's foundation.
Not that it has to do particularly with Tyngsboro, but there are some spooky stories that have to do with King Philip's War that are pretty interesting.
Ooh, okay. We should definitely, how much do you know about that stuff? Because that would actually be interesting to get into.
I know a tad.
Okay. All right. Let me just, let's get into the little bit I have here about Colonel Edward Tyng, which is the guy we're referring to.
Yes.
Full name. So yeah, he built that house in Tyngsboro. It's right next to Innovation Academy, or at least it was. I'm pretty sure it burnt down in 1981. Right, and it was actually registered in the for the National Register of Historical Places in America. That was in 1977, so it didn't last very long being registered. So that kind of sucks. But yeah, so Colonel Edward Tyng was there, and there's also, if you go there today, like I said, the whole place is burnt down, but they do have like a big boulder that's over there, and it has a plaque on it. It's Juan Alessence Rock.
Yes.
You know who Juan Alessence was?
No, but I know The Rock.
Right. Yeah, so he was the son of Chief Passaconaway. So yeah, the Penacooks or Penacooks, I think it's pronounced. They were the tribe that's like in the area or whatever. So basically, all their land got sold to Colonel Tyng. According to some of the sources, most of the sources I found, they were good friends. I'm sure they were on friendly terms, but I'm also certain that he wasn't jazzed about all of his land being taken away, right?
Yeah.
So, allegedly, on that rock, Passaconaway's boulder, every now and then people see his ghost sitting on the rock. Spooky on the rock. Right.
Interestingly, I used to live probably like a 2 minutes walk from there when I
really?
still lived in Tyngsboro, and I never seen anything,
Yeah.
but I would hang out around there sometimes in the evening, and that was always a spooky
Yeah.
area. There was always weird vibes around that rock and around Innovation Academy in general, but especially around that rock. I will say, I'm not just saying it to say it. It was definitely some vibes.
Right.
Definitely some heebie-jeebie feels.
Heebie-jeebies. So yeah, I know that whole school has a whole spooky vibe to it, just because of like the architecture and how it looks and its placement just underneath all these trees and stuff. It kind of looks like something like straight out of a horror movie if you think about it.
Yeah.
So
yeah, it does.
I mean, I guess before we get into more of the tantalizing details of the the murders and such that happened there, what's your position on ghosts? Are you agnostic? Are you a firm believer? Or are you like, the stories are cool, maybe I get a spooky vibe, but honestly, it's probably not real? What do you think?
I feel like personally, I'm leaning more in the position of there definitely is something to it.
Right.
I don't know if I completely believe in ghosts in the entirely traditional sense.
Right.
But I definitely do, just from some personal experiences I've had in the past, think that there definitely is. I can't give concrete terms to ghosts or whatever, but I do think that ghosts or ghost-like things, I tend to fall more on the side of belief.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people feel the same way. Maybe not a lot of people vocalize it as much as they do, just because of the nature of the society that we live in. Everyone is, or we're grown up, in these science classes thinking that we live in a material world. Once you die, you're dead. You cease to exist because your body stops working. Your brain shuts down. Everything shuts down. So why would there be anything after that? Because the mechanism is destroyed. But then you get this, these weird gut feelings that everybody gets from time to time. Even the non-believers, they get a little strange feeling every now and then. Everyone has some kind of story, even if it's not like straight up apparitions. It's like, like I said.
Oh yeah.
Everyone has that.
I think that just about everyone has a story, like you said, to some degree, that you can't exactly completely explain away. Be it a feeling, be it some sort of noise or other experience, or seeing something. I definitely think that there's a lot of things that happen that people can't completely explain.
Right.
And you could say, well, the human mind is fallible. Our minds can be playing tricks on us, but that's not all. That may not always be the case. That may not always be the case. Not that it can't happen, but
I guess if we're looking at it from that perspective, and we're thinking, if we're thinking, what are the chances when we're looking at all the different eyewitness testimonies about ghostly experiences and stuff? I bet that like anywhere between 70 to 90% of them probably are just some kind of trick of the mind, where you heard about a ghost story and then you're in the area and then you freak yourself out. A little mouse scurries around the field and you're like, ah! All your friends turn around at the same time. So you kind of just imagine this thing happening to you.
Yes.
Certainly mass hallucinations do happen. And I've heard lots of stories about those being true. So, I want to get into our personal experiences, and like any of our family members maybe had experiences. We could tell those stories in a second. Let's get back into the local stuff with these guys. So, like I said, we already had Jonathan Tyng. Colonel Edward Tyng. And, he had a son. I believe it was, let's see. Yeah, Jonathan Tyng. And then Eliezer Tyng was Jonathan's son.
The sick name.
Yeah. I know. Eliezer, that's a new one. We should, or I guess it's an old one. That should come back. That is a sweet one.
We don't name people like we used to. Eliezer's
right.
That's a good one.
this might make you not like the name as much. He definitely owned slaves, and the rest of the Tyngs definitely owned slaves as well, at least prior to him. So his father, Jonathan, and then his grandfather, Colonel Tyng, that we mentioned before, they had, before the place burned down, of course, in the basement, that or the attic, a little conflicting sources there, but either one, they had just chains that were attached to the floor, and that's apparently where they keep the slaves, just chained down there. So it kind of makes sense that everybody gets such terrible, wretched vibes from the place. Not even from
that definitely creates some really bad vibes.
Right.
That's rough.
Bit of a buzzkill, that Elijah.
No, it is. Cool name, bad guy.
Right. So, you know, that was definitely the case with those guys. Like I said, I also heard this story that Juan Alescent too was a slave, supposedly. A lot of the sources that I'm seeing are saying that, you know, they were good friends and he just spent the rest of his days at the mansion and that was pretty much it. He just kind of chilled there and, you know, sat on his rock, pondered the days of the old where his people were in the area and thrived, and thought about how it was all coming to an end, which is pretty sad in itself. But it could have been much worse. I mean, I know for certain from my research that tons of Native Americans, especially during King Philip's War, were sold into slavery, including the same tribe that they were from. There was a lot of fires actually that happened prior to King Philip's War, that a lot of these, like the Penacooks and some other native tribes, that they blamed the fires on them, even though they had no evidence to suggest that. And then they just brought all these people down to the courthouses in Boston. And then after that, they shipped a lot of them away to,
yeah.
You know, I had it in my notes for the last podcast, but I believe it was the Bahamas or somewhere around there that they actually sold a lot of them into slavery, which there's some people with Northeastern Native American heritage that still live in that area, which is really interesting. Right?
Very interesting.
Right. So those guys, most likely, not great. The real guy who sucked the most, that all the worst ghost stories that you hear come from this guy, Elizur's son, John Alfred Tyng. This guy sucked. So
even worse than his great-granddaddy.
Even worse than his great-granddad owning all the slaves and kicking out the Native Americans. This guy was by far the worst, which is like, how do you top that? Well, so, you know, good old John Alfred Tyng, born into this, Richie rich family. So, you know, those guys are, you know, always the best and most well-rounded members of society.
Oh, of course.
So, you know, he owned the house at the time. I believe it was late 1700s at this time. I'll have the exact dates in a second. But basically, he met this woman named Judith Thompson. And, you know, she was the prettiest girl around. She was working at the farm with her father. And her father did like a lot of work for the Tyngs or whatever. So naturally, they met each other. And they married, but secretly. They secretly married. It was more like, he wasn't married at the time, but it was like a secret affair sort of thing that nobody really knew about. Or so the legend goes.
Okay.
Also some conflicting things here. Some people think they had a child. Some people think they had 3. That, at the very least, they definitely had one son. Or it actually could have been a daughter. I'm not even sure. But they had one child together for sure. You know, and then John Tyng, super into this girl, loved her a lot. And then they had a kid or multiple, and he started hating this lady. He started resenting the fact that he couldn't get anything done. You know, he's just like this wealthy, well-off guy, and all of a sudden he has all these priorities that he has to deal with. So what does he do? He kills her.
Oh, jeez.
He kills her and he buries her in the basement, unmarked, or that either in the basement or in an unmarked grave somewhere. And this is where things start to get interesting. So some of my sources that I was able to find, it was just him working alone, and he just in the middle of the night just offed her and her child. Other sources say that there was a local doctor who aided him in the euthanasia of his former lover and his bastard child.
Oh, God.
So, all right, this...
Oh, God.
The thing that's funny about I'm doing the Trump hands. The thing that's funny about this guy is that the doctor has, if he was a real guy, he has like the most stereotypical name for an evil doctor. Why don't you take a guess what his name could have been? Because it's funny. I'm putting you on the spot.
Evil doctor name. My brain is going to Mangala, but I don't think it was Mangala.
Dude, all right, so it's pretty close. His name was Dr. Blood.
What?
Dr. Blood. Yeah. Like a little too on the nose, man. He was definitely in the right industry for that name. Yeah, dude. Okay, so supposedly, he helped Jonathan Tyng in the murder of his wife and 1 or 3 kids or whatever, and then they hid either their bodies underneath the floorboards or somewhere completely different. And that's rough. And it's messed up. Dr. Blood's not a great guy. Who would have guessed? Dr. Blood.
It sounds like a very cheerful guy with that name. Couldn't have seen that one coming.
Right. So, and this is where it gets spooky. So all the tales say that after that Judith Thompson got murdered, her ghost haunted not only the house, but angrily haunted John in his last few days. And what happened is that right after, or like a couple years later, Dr. Blood and John Tyng, they got really sick and they died super quick after that, almost like she cursed them. Dr. Blood supposedly found dead in the streets with a footprint on his forehead, seemingly from the ghost of Judith. And apparently she was heard laughing hysterically through the streets. Oh, I have killed him. I've murdered Mr. Dr. Blood, the terrible Dr. Blood. Supposedly that happened, right? But the spooky ghost story is that anytime, so John got really sick too, and he was staying in the house. Supposedly he was getting tormented by her ghost constantly. He actually built multiple houses to try to get away from her on the same property. He would build new houses to try to get away from the spirit, and she would just kept following. She didn't care. She was pissed. Her spirit was determined to, bring this man with her to the grave. So
trying to get away from a spirit, it doesn't seem like a very good idea to build a house next door.
Yeah, you like that. I
feel like you got to go farther away than that.
Yeah, even then, if you're an all-powerful, bodiless, angry spirit, I don't know how much a couple blocks are even going to make the difference. But yeah, so people would come over, and John would be sick in bed or whatever. And supposedly, as people would come, they would be turned away at the door by the ghost of Judith, although they didn't know it was a ghost. She would come up to the door and be like, he's fine. Don't worry about it. He's fine. Don't worry about it. Everything's okay. No, go. It's fine. So she just kind of hastened his death by moving everybody away from him, according to the tales. So, yeah, after a while, he finally died. And Judith, as the tale goes, that she cursed the Tyng name and the name of John. And to this day, his grave is unmarked. We don't know where exactly he is in the graveyard, right next to the old Tyng mansion. and very well the whole Ting lineage may have ended. There was this one lady who didn't have any kids, who was, I believe, was either the granddaughter, or the great granddaughter of John, and she basically sold off this land to this other guy, and she was like, I don't have any, I don't have any heirs, I don't have anybody, but just take my last name so that the Ting name can live on. So technically it does, but it's not actually
through name alone.
Yeah, by name alone. And of course, around that time, that must have been, I'm not exactly sure, either early 18 or late 17. That's kind of when Tyngsboro got its name and stuff.
Yep.
So, the name lives on, but all those guys, not so much.
The Ting bloodline is no more.
No, thank God, honestly.
Yeah, I know, right?
So, yeah, after John's death, apparently, in Ting Mansion, the sound of music and celebration were heard from within inside. All these ghosties celebrating, supposedly. And after that, there was a couple other spooky things that happened. So basically, there's these guys. Let's see, I believe this is going to be late 1800s at this point. There's these guys. They were in a big snowstorm. They were going from Nashua and they were moving downward. But they got caught in this big snowstorm, like I said. And they passed by Ting Mansion. And at the time, nobody was supposed to have been living at Ting Mansion. But they see these dudes in the wagon. They see the mansion completely lit up and filled with noise and stuff. So they go over because, like, if we stay in the snowstorm, we're gonna get offed. We're gonna die here. So they go up and they knock on the door, and then who opens the door but Judith, supposedly, or the ghost of a woman in a green dress holding a baby, and behind her there's this big party going on, and they're like, can we stay inside? It's really bad out here. And she's like, oh yeah, of course. I got rooms upstairs. I got a stable for the horses. Feel free to spend the night. So they go upstairs. It's a really nice, well furnished, mansion that they're staying in, and they don't suspect anything to be off about the whole situation. Maybe it was a little weird that they were in pretty old attire, but maybe it was just like a costume party or whatever,
Yep.
So they wake up, and the once well-furbished room that they were in is covered in cobwebs. It's all broken down, and nothing is like how it was the night before, which is very spooky. Very spooky. The whole place was abandoned. It was just like they walked into this area, and it was like a time warp, which is weird.
I've heard stories like that before. It is very, very interesting. Very, very interesting. And very freaky.
It is really weird, yeah. So what's interesting about that is that some of the sources, again, were saying that this was a ghost story from like towns over, or like from different places, that was just kind of retold with the whole Judith Thompson story over top of it. Excuse me. But it does bring up the interesting question of, okay, so maybe ghosts are real. Maybe it's not like the soul of a person is trapped. Maybe it's more like the time in which something traumatic happened to this person creates some kind of ripple in the timeline, and that,
it's like residual energy.
Yeah. It's almost like that time period back then had such a extreme energy, like you're saying, that it just kind of survives and lives on. And that's like one of the theories, is that it's not necessarily like these people are being tortured to relive these experiences. It's that it's like their extreme, like, death or whatever created this ripple. What do you think about that?
Yeah, it's like a repeating playback loop. No, I mean, I think that's interesting. I think, honestly, if you, I guess, want to be scientific about it, not that there's science that's proving this, but I mean, it seems more plausible in a scientific sense than, ghostly spirits just haunting because, ghosts. I've heard other stories like that where it seems like the spirit or whatever you want to call it is caught in a loop, and people see them doing the same things repeatedly.
Yeah.
And I think there's credence to it. I feel like this is something that people say a lot. It sounds kind of cliche, but we are energy. Our brains store memories through energy, through electrical synapses, and something so immensely traumatic and disturbing. I mean, it would make sense if it left some kind of an imprint,
right?
In some way, shape, or form.
No, most definitely. I think it's very interesting to think about.
Yeah.
Let's see if I got anything else left here from the spooky notes. Oh, yeah. So there's one other spooky occurrence that happened at the mansion before it burnt down. Kind of two. Apparently, a sailor and his wife tried to stay there at some time. Must have been like early 1900s at this point. And then they were just like ripped out of their beds in the middle of the night by like these like just like a group of men like screaming and yelling at them, and which is completely weird. And then they just kind of disappeared. And then the sailor and his wife, they just like left immediately. Which,
understandably,
yeah, that's pretty bad.
Maybe it was all the Ting guys.
Back to we were just talking about with like the residual timeline or whatever. It almost makes sense because during King Philip's War or whatever, all the colonists in the area moved away for like an entire year. Nobody was there. It just turned into a ghost town for that time period. Besides Colonel Ting, he was the only crazy guy that decided to stay there, and he basically fortified his house and turned it into like a militia fort for the time.
Like an outpost.
Yeah, an outpost for the time being. And there was maybe like one other in like Dunstable, or now Dunstable. But other than that, like nobody in the area. So and when I hear that story, I think to myself, oh, well, maybe it's like Gettysburg, where you hear the stories of like all the soldiers walking around and stuff. Maybe there's a residual haunting of the people that maybe
Philip's War was bloody and brutal. Yeah. And it is a dark, dark part of American and Massachusetts, New England history. It was brutal, it was bloody, and it is dark. A lot of natives were massacred. There were many brutal retributions from the natives against the settlers.
Right.
And there actually is a curse related to King Philip's War that supposedly King Philip's put on Massachusetts in a specific area that's affiliated with King Philip's War. And oh my goodness, what town is it? You know that Massachusetts, we have our own spooky triangle.
Oh, I knew there was one that's like in Vermont that maybe connects to New Hampshire and Mass slightly, but I didn't know there was. There's a spooky triangle in Mass, I believe.
Let me look it up real quick, because it's further out west. It's more central Mass, but
right.
That and a lot of the weird happenings that have happened in I want to say it's the Holyoke Triangle, but I might be wrong.
Why is it always a triangle? Why couldn't it be like a square or like an octagon?
That is a really great question. The Bridgewater Triangle.
Oh, I have heard of that. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, that sounds very familiar.
And the Bridgewater Triangle, some people say that all of the occurrences that have happened, it's linked to King Philip's curse, coming from King Philip and his death at the end of the King Philip's War.
Yeah.
Also, King Philip wasn't his real name. He just I forget if that's what the settlers called him, or if he took that name. His actual name was native, but.
So I actually know this because I talked about it on the last podcast. Yeah. So sorry if anybody listened to the last one, and I'm going to spew the same nonsense as before. So his actual name was Metacomet, and the reason why it's called King's Philip Wars because his father had really good relationships with the colonists. And I forget what tribe he was a part of. Ooh, it's losing me. But that was basically it, though. That yeah, when the colonists initially came here, it was fine because there wasn't a bunch of them and they weren't taking up every area. They were just kind of like on the coast or whatever. So it's like, okay, yeah. These guys are cool. We can share how we farm and stuff. We can help them get through the winter. So they had good relations, and then disease got even worse. Pushing inward into America got even worse, and by then, after Metacomet's father died, he was like, screw this name that I was given by my father for these people that are destroying our way of life. Which, dude, so ironic that they call the whole war after like his dead name. They're dead naming him every time they mention this war. Like that.
He was pissed, dude. Understandably,
right? I'd be rolling in my grave if I was him. So I'm sure he haunts somewhere too. I wouldn't be surprised because he got the year that the war started was, I believe, 1675 and 1676. I think he was like trying to flee upward, like closer into Maine, and then these this militia followed him and they just shot him in the dead of night, pretty much. So
yeah,
probably something spooky up there too, man. Like if he's probably set on all kinds of curses.
Oh yeah. There's all sorts of. It's one thing I do love about Massachusetts. We have so much history, and there's so many interesting things to learn. Even though a lot of it is kind of dark, like King Philip's War,
right.
Salem witch trials,
right.
Even the Industrial Revolution with the mill girls. Super interesting. A lot of darkness to it, but super interesting.
I'm hoping to have my next episode actually be about the mills and the mill girls, because a lot of tragic stuff happened there too.
Yes. Oh yeah.
Did you ever...
those girls deserve their stories to be told, because they did a lot for the Industrial Revolution in the United States. They were some of the first, like, I guess, true, like, working women in the United States on a large scale.
Right.
And they worked in horrible conditions for not much money at all.
No.
That's one of the reasons why the Lowell 5 Bank has its name, because it's a Lowell 5-cent saving bank, because I believe it was like every week or 2 weeks they'd get paid 5 cents, and Lowell 5 was the only bank that would let you start a bank account with as low as 5 cents.
I forgot. Ooh, excuse me.
Yep.
I forgot you told me about that.
Yep.
Wow. Yeah. No, that's... Wow.
No, it's crazy.
Well, then they just kept that name. They're like, yeah, that was something cool we did for them. That was awesome.
We were progressive.
We were so progressive. I mean, it was all the stuff that happened at the mills.
And
other places like mines and other industrialized factories and stuff. That's what set off all the different labor laws and child labor laws and stuff too.
Yeah.
I don't want to get too off topic because I do want to talk about that stuff on the next podcast. That'd be really cool.
Yes.
But yeah, no, that is very much relevant to what we're talking about.
Yes.
So let's kind of run it back. Like I said, the house burnt down.
Yes.
Tyngs Mansion. So it was pretty recent. I mean, relatively speaking, like I said, I believe it was 1981. But that's the thing. So in August is when it burnt down. But right before that, in around September, there was a group of people that wanted to perform a seance inside of the Tyng Mansion. And then it was scheduled right around the time it burnt down, and they couldn't do it just because it's just mysteriously burnt down. I mean, it was some kind of arson, I guess, but I wonder.
I was going to ask if they ever figured out what started the fire.
I couldn't find anything that said who or what started the fire. It just, arson because it's on fire, I guess.
Yeah.
Maybe Judith, it was her last thing to keep anyone from talking to John Tyng. Maybe it was her last way of keeping that man silent for the end of time. Who knows?
Yeah.
Maybe it was Juan Alescent who just was sick of seeing that and wanted it to return to how it was before, you know, the natural landscape it was. Who knows, dude? But that's a spooky one to me, where they were like, yeah, we're going to try to talk to these ghosts. And then they're like, nah, you ain't talking to us. Boom, it's gone.
Boom.
We're good.
Flamed them. Yeah, no, that's crazy. That is crazy. And Tyngsboro has had some weird things, just town-wide has had some weird things. And you said that she supposedly cursed not just John, but the area too, right?
I think really just the Ting name, but...
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, the name's on the town.
The name is on the town, so I don't know, man.
And some, what was it, the 1920s? There was that horrible flood that destroyed a lot of the town. Have you ever seen some of the pictures from that? There's one really famous picture of a house that's floating under the Tyngsboro Bridge, and literally, like, the roof of the house is, like, kind of scraping along the bottom of the bridge, which is crazy to think about because, I mean... Not that the bridge is that high up, but when you think about going over the bridge and looking down at the water, what it has to be like, I don't know, 30 feet at least to the surface of the river.
It feels like 6
to think that it was
or something.
Oh yeah, no, it's high. Yeah. It's high. So to think that the river was that high, that's insane.
They're like, yeah, two-story house was scraping on it, dude. That's because I saw some of the photos because when I was doing research on Little Drake of Tyngsboro, I was learning about the Varnum family house, the Hawk, I think it was the Hawk Valley Farm or whatever, which is still exists, but it's getting closer to Logan, closer to like the Pawtucket section of Lowell. But yeah, that is really far away from the Merrimack, and there was water like real close up to it. It was like it's turned into beachfront property. It was crazy.
Oh yeah, it was crazy. Tyngsboro turned into a lake. Yeah. That was a horrible flood. And interesting, slight fun fact. At that time, Tyngsboro had the longest pedestrian footbridge in the world. I believe it was in the world. It was definitely the longest in the country. But it went from where Vesper Country Club is, like
really,
yes, all the way. It was like ridiculously long. It went from like Vesper and like Old Ting Island to I think somewhere closer to the bridge. It was like long, and the flood completely destroyed it, just washed it out, which is too bad.
That's kind of cool. Wait, so was it? It just like went over the river, just like a walking path, basically. That's really cool.
Yeah. It was a huge, wicked long pedestrian. I don't think it was very wide, but it was super long pedestrian footpath to get from the island over more towards central Tyngsboro. Which is too bad it's still not standing, because that would have been really, really. I can only imagine. It seems kind of breathtaking just being able to walk over the river like that. But yeah, unfortunately, that that flood destroyed a lot of the old infrastructure around that part of Tyngsboro, including the bridge.
Yeah, not the mansion though.
Not the mansion.
Judith had to finish the job herself. She couldn't let nature do it. But yeah, you know what's cool about Vesper Country Club? I talked about this in the last podcast too. But that was like the favorite spot for the Penacooks, the Juan Alescent's tribe.
Interesting.
Yeah, that's basically where they stayed, and it was the last bit of land that they had too before like all their land was sold off. That was the last bit that they had, and of course they sold it to Ting because it became Tyngs Island, and then later the Country Club. But you know, I bet if anything's haunted, that place haunted as shit. That place probably to be haunted, right?
Now you see a bunch of yuppie dingbats just playing golf, paying like tens of $1,000s a year for a membership. They're like, dude, we lived here, we fished here, this was our home, and y'all are coming in here and just being like, oh,
no offense,
luxury.
No offense to anybody that goes to the Vesper Country Club.
No offense, no.
You guys.
Hey, honestly, if I had the $40,000 a year, I would do it. I like golf. It's a beautiful place. I get cursed.
Yeah. It seems like a great place to golf, but just doesn't seem like a great place if you want to avoid negative spiritual energy.
Yeah, if you don't want to get cursed by a Native American tribe, probably don't golf there.
Yeah.
If you don't mind and you like the golfing,
Yeah. Be respectful when you're golfing.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Maybe say thanks.
That's the PSA for today. So back to personal experiences.
Yes.
I'm curious. I know you talked to me about it before, but what was that experience that you had at your house a while ago? Were you
So the house that I grew up in, it's right down the street from where I'm currently at in Lowell, right off the Pawtucket Boulevard.
right?
It wasn't an old house or anything. I think it was built probably in the 50s at the latest, but like 30s or 40s at the earliest. It's not a very old house at all.
Right.
But there were definitely some weird happenings that have happened in that house. And one thing that I tie it to is possibly my late grandfather, my maternal grandfather. My mom and I were the ones that experienced the most things. My dad never experienced really anything. But then again, me and my mom, I guess, if you'd want to think of who the ghost, if you want to think of who the ghost may want to expose itself to, I mean, his daughter and grandson probably a little bit more important than his son-in-law. So
makes sense.
Half of his ashes we buried in the backyard after he passed. He passed away when I was An urn with half his ashes is buried in the backyard, and he passed away when I was 3. And not long after that, the kind of cliche ghost things would happen. My mom would have to get up really early for work, and she'd be in the bathroom getting ready and stuff, and she'd hear footsteps going down the halls. She would think, oh, okay, Derek or, my dad got up out of bed. She'd go and look. We were both sound asleep. Couldn't have been anything. I mean, she heard it so many times, like, she'll swear by her life it was footsteps. Like, it wasn't just cracks, it was footsteps. And, there are times where you might hear a weird crack in a house, but you know footsteps when you hear them. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So she'd experienced stuff like that a lot. A lot of, doors being closed or lights being shut off, and then you come back a minute later and it's back open again, or the light's back on again, and you're like, okay, I know for a fact that I shut that off, but maybe, I don't know, maybe I forgot. But a lot of stuff like that. But the weirdest thing that happened that I know for a fact I cannot write off is I was probably 10 or 11, and in the basement was my little game room where I'd play on my Xbox. I had my couch down there, my TV, and it was in the far side of the basement. And also in the basement was a laundry room. That was kind of, you went down the stairs. I was straight ahead through a door. The laundry room was to the right, when you got down the stairs. So I'm, just playing Call of Duty or something, being a little doofus. And my mom was doing some laundry. And she was like, Derek, come look at this. And I could tell by the way that she called for me that, like, something was either like, I could hear excitement in her voice and like confusion. So I run into the room, and there's a picture on the floor, completely square to the room. Like, it's not like it was like offset. It was right in the middle of the floor, completely square to the room, facing. So when you'd walk up to it, you'd look down and it was facing right at you. And it was a picture of my grandpa. My grandpa was a big golfer, and it was a picture of him and a few of his golf buddies. And my mom was like, I've never seen this picture before in my life. I didn't even know I had this picture. And she was like, did you see this? Yeah, it just appeared. And it was in a frame and everything. Yeah, perfectly in the middle of the floor. Perfectly in the middle of the floor, right in front of the washer and dryer. So, like, there's no way you could miss it. You'd have to walk right up to it to get to the washer and dryer. So it was like it was there to be seen. And my mom was like, did you see this? Like, did you put this here? I was like, no, I had no idea. I didn't see it or anything. So my mom puts it up on a table and it's like, okay, I'll come back and grab this later. That's so strange. We were just both confused. And
Yes.
I kind of forgot about it for the rest of the day. Then my mom went to my dad and was like, did you like see the picture or put the picture there or what? And interestingly, he said that he went down earlier in the morning, went into the room, saw the picture on the floor, and put it up on a table. Now, this is before my mom then found it on the floor. So that's weird. But then it was either early the next morning or late at night. My mom comes to me and said, Derek, oh my God, you will not believe what I just realized. And I was like, what? She was like, it was your grandpa's birthday yesterday.
Oh, he's like, dude, don't forget about me, guys. He's trying to remind you.
Yep.
That's so weird. And you said
so weird.
You said the painting was framed, right? Was it in like a glass frame?
Mm-hmm.
So then it's like, even if it magically fell down off the table, it would have shattered. So someone would have had to like deliberately place it there. I mean, of course, you said it was like perfectly centered, which is weird in and itself. But like the fact,
Well, you know, there's a chance if it fell, but yeah, no, it was glass. It was perfectly centered. It was facing exactly the way that it would need to face. So when you'd walk up to it, you'd look down and be facing the right way up.
That's so.
And it, to this day, I have no explanation. Like I said, my mom didn't even know that she had the picture. I don't know where it could have come from. So like we stored most of the things we stored in the attic. So
where is that painting now? Do you guys have it somewhere?
I believe my mom still has it somewhere in a room or with safe stuff in storage. But yes, we do still have it. It's cool. Yeah, no, it definitely
the haunted painting.
Spooky. It's definitely special to me though because
it's good ghost,
you know,
good haunting.
Yes. Yeah, and that's another thing too. In that house, I never felt. Yeah, it was creepy, but I never felt threatened. I never felt like whatever was going on was malicious.
Right.
I just felt like there was something there, and something almost just kind of watching over everything. And you know, when I was a kid, like my parents were going through it. It was before they got divorced, and there was a lot of negative stuff in the house. So it almost felt kind of like it was like a protective guardian almost watching over us. Super, super weird, super interesting. And that is definitely the most ghostly thing that I've ever experienced that I cannot explain. And I still had experiences in the house where weird stuff would happen, the same little weird stuff, but nothing that overtly unexplainable.
That is so interesting to me. You know, I've never had any like personal experiences, but I do. My sister that I'm closest in age to had a really interesting experience that happened to her and her friend one time. Did I ever tell you about that story?
It's not ringing a bell.
Okay. So I don't know how long we've been going on this podcast. We've been going pretty long, but I'll try to keep this one short and sweet. So it was down by the Merrimack River. There's this one little park that it's like in between the Tyngsboro High School and the bridge. Oh, I forget. Yeah.
It's down a hill, right?
Yeah, that one down a hill, and there's like a way for you to like boat launch your boats and kayaks, whatever, the little concrete, because you call it a dock. So it was late at night. She was in high school at the time. She was hanging out with her one friend from theater. You know, there was nothing romantic about it, or at least I assume not. He was gay. I don't know if she knew that. They were in theater, so whoop-de-doo. And so, yeah, so they're just chit-chatting, and they're talking about theater. They're talking about just having a good time, probably boys at that point. And
high schooler things.
Yeah, high schooler things, right? Anything paranormal was the last thing on their mind, right? And where they're sitting actually was right on that concrete dock that I was just talking about that overlooks the river. So, like I said, they're just chit-chatting, and then all of a sudden, they start to both trail off in conversation and just stare out over the river. And then my sister's friend goes, "Do you see that?" She goes, "Yeah, I see it." And what it was how she described it. It sounded like a Scooby-Doo-esque plume of green smoke emerged out of the river. And she said they both saw this, mind you. And then out of that plume of green smoke, out walked a Native American man in full, like, traditional, like, regalia and attire. And a little bit behind him was what looked like maybe a late 1800s, maybe early 1900s businessman who was submerged like waist deep in the water. And they just see this happen and they start moving towards them. They're like, "Oh my God, do you see that?" And they just both look at each other, say yes. And they freak the hell out and they just start running back to their car. My sister, Teresa, at the time, she had a coffee that was right next to her. She forgot to get the coffee. So she did run away, but then she came back, grabbed the coffee before she could get possessed by the ghost, and then she kept going, which is hilarious. But
can't litter.
First of all, don't litter. Second of all, stay caffeinated.
Yeah.
Which to me is crazy because like we were saying earlier, if you ever had a ghostly experience and it was like, oh, you're both freaking each other out, you start to get into that headspace, something weird rustles in the corner and you just kind of, you both imagine something, but they weren't even aware of anything paranormal. They were just having a good time. They're having a good time.
It just happened.
It was almost like they got into a flow state where they were just having a good time. And because they were in that flow state, it opened up their ability to perceive what was going on around them. And once that happened, these spirits were able to present themselves. At least that's what, when I think of it, that's what I think maybe could have, like.
No, I see what you're saying. No, that makes sense.
I don't know.
Oh, that's crazy.
It's crazy, dude. So.
And I guess to tie to what you were saying earlier about, these kind of imprints of energy on things and these traumatic events, I feel like whenever there's something that has to do with the Native Americans, I feel like there's always credence to it because, like, there's so much trauma there. There's so much negative energy there that these people went through, being ripped from their homes. And I definitely think there's something to it.
And even that guy that my sister saw, like the man in business attire that was like half submerged in the water, who knows? Maybe that was someone that got murdered in like that flood that happened at Tyngsboro. I mean, that makes sense.
That's true. No, that's true. I think I think quite a few people died. So that would make sense.
And it all came from.
And I would imagine that whole area during the flood would have just been absolutely inundated. Yeah. It would have been completely underwater.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, he's half submerged, but he would have been completely under.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
No, that's really freaky to think about.
That's freaky.
Oh, there's something to it. There is something to it.
Something to it. All right. Well, I think we've rambled for long enough. Thanks for coming on, Derek. I appreciate you taking the time.
Thanks for having me.
Oh yeah, it was great. It was a fun time. I like the story.
Was awesome.
Oh yeah. Well,
I'm glad I could share it.
Oh yeah.
Hopefully I can come on again at some point if you do this again. This was awesome.
Yeah, man. Of course. All right. Well, I guess that's it. Thanks for watching Inside Lowell here at the Well Point Studios. This was a segment called Thrills by the Mills. Tune in next time. Like I said, we're probably going to go over the mills in Lowell, some of the happenings that happened there. Either we're going to get into a local park there, or we might just combine both into one if we can manage to make it concise enough. So yeah, stay tuned. Keep watching Inside Lowell and stay curious.